Good. Good. All right. Last time we learned that King Solomon is singing a song. He's singing the Song of Songs, the ultimate song. And what is he singing? About the marriage between God and the Jewish people and the Jewish people and God. Because that's what a song is. What is a song? A song is the melody goes up and down. And so it is also with us. It goes, we go up to God, God comes down to us. There's this relationship of love. And the Rebbe said that there's different levels of this love. And that it depends on our love for God, and God answers to us. That's what's called, word of the bride. In Hebrew, the word for bride is kala. And God is the groom. The word for groom in Hebrew is chatan. The word kala means to have a desire or to be totally, like, how do you say, non-existent. Kala means to be like nothing. So that, says the Rebbe, that's two types of love. One type of love is that we have a tremendous longing for God, but we're two separate things. God is separate and we're separate, but we just realize that God is greater than us and he creates us and all these things, but we feel ourselves. And the other one is a type of a love for God where we're non-existent. We're just completely unified with God. These are like the big tzaddikim. And that's another meaning of kala. And God reacts to these two types of love, to this lower type of love when we're separate. So God reacts with a certain type of a blessing, which is a big inspiration, etc. And the second type is that God reveals himself in the world, not just in our inspiration and our soul, but in the world, a revealed way in the world. This is especially going to happen in the days of the Mashiach. I guess there are certain people that felt this even now, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So that according to the two different types of kala, of going up to God, are the two types of chatan, how God comes down. And the ultimate, the highest levels that God comes down and is revealed in this world, because we have to remember that what we're talking about, we're not talking about that God is some sort of a spiritual angel or power or force, or God is the creator. That there's nothing except for God. God is creating everything, but he's creating in such a way that he's concealed. And he put the Jews here in order to reveal it. That's the way God set up the world. That's what we believe. That's why he created man, the first man, and Adam and Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Because most people just want to be part of the world. They don't want to go against nature, and they don't want to go against their nature. But the Jewish people, the thing is that they want to go against their nature to realize that there's a creator, and that the creator is more real and more precious than anything they can possibly imagine. Good. So it says that that's the whole idea of the commandments. The idea of the commandments is the second type, an expression of God's reaction to our love, that by means of doing the commandments, we reveal God in the physical world. Maybe we don't see it because we're not sensitive enough, but that's what's happening. So that's what he says, he may be all the mitzvahs in the commandments. It says, that a person should do them and live in them. Now, what are the commandments? Maybe there's people that might watch this afterwards because I'm putting this up on WhatsApp. What are the commandments? The commandments are not, no other religion has commandments except for Judaism. We said this a lot of times. There are rituals and there's practices and there's whatever it is, the ceremonies. But in Judaism, there's what's called commandments. Commandments mean that God right now is revealing his will, why he put us here. What should we do with our arms? What are we supposed to do with our eyes? What are we supposed to do with our heart? What are we supposed to do with our mouth? What are we supposed to do? What things are you supposed to say? What you're supposed to eat? What you're supposed to... this is what God himself wants, the creator of the universe that took us out of Egypt, he gave us the Torah. And these commandments are not just one time back then. God, when he gave the commandments, he's revealing what his eternal will is right now. It's above time. So that's the whole idea of the commandments. In the commandments, it says a person will do them and he will live in them. Live. That the person, don't say that the commandments will enliven you. You do the commandment. He will do the commandments. The word for in Hebrew, to do, means also to make. So that is what it says. Yaseh otam adam. The person will make the commandments and live in them. What does it mean he'll make the commandments? The commandments come from God. What does it mean he makes the commandments? It means adam oseh otam liot mitzvot, that God makes them to be commandments. And what does it mean? If there's no commanded, then the commandments are not worth anything. So the person takes it seriously and makes it into his commandment. Like it says, Vasitem otam, atem, that you are the ones that make them. Like it says, V'achakak, and in other words, it says, you will live in them. But if a Jew, there's commandments, if a Jew doesn't put them on, these commandments, let's say tefillin, a Jew doesn't put them on, so they're just two boxes with things that are not commandments. As soon as a Jew does actually uses his willpower to link himself with God's willpower, then these two boxes, leather boxes, they become a commandment. True, God commanded them, but if they're just sitting there, it means nothing. It's like taking a seed and putting it into the ground. Before the seed is put into the ground, it's not really a seed. It doesn't do any of the work that a seed is supposed to do. It's like a grain or something. Excuse me 1 second. Let me see. Somebody's at the door. Just please give me 1 moment. Okay, that's what it means. All the commitment, all the commandments, and then it says you will, after you do the commandments, in other words, you accept the commandments, you do it. Like I said, it's like putting a seed in the ground. You have a seed until you put it in the ground, you don't see it's a seed. It's just like a grain, right? Like grain, you can make you have a lot of grains, you can grind it up, maybe make bread out of it or something. That's what it says. After you do the commandment, then you live in them. Then a person receives life from them. Then they become above the person. The same thing like we said before. You take a grain, and the grain is like nothing. You take a lot of grains, you can make bread out of it, you can make flour out of it. But if you put that grain in the ground, then suddenly it grows up and there's a whole new thing. The same with the commandments. The commandments are just, they're dead things on their own. But as soon as a person puts them on, then they become a commandment. He links himself up with God, and then he receives life. That's what is v'chai b'him. Then he links himself up to God, the commander, and the commandments attach him to something which is above even the spiritual, to the creator of the spiritual. All the commandments here at the V'rim Gashmin, all the commandments the Jewish people do are physical things. Etrog, it's a commandment on Sukkah, on the holiday of Sukkot, to take 4 different types of vegetation, and one of them is like this fruit that looks like a lemon called an etrog. You take the 4 types of vegetation, put them together, and you just shake it. That's a commandment. Sit in a sukkah, a booth that you sit in. Tzitzit, there's strands that you put on the corner of your garments. The sacrifices that come from an animal, from oxes and from the sheep. The source of these physical things, even the animals, comes from what's called the world of Tohu. Lifnei Melech Bnei Israel, before there was a king among the Jewish people. Hello. אני באמצע שיעור, את רוצה להגיד לי משהו קצר? אני אתן לך את המספר, אבל תצלצלי עוד רבע שעה. טוב? תודה. מה? תצלצלי אליי בעוד רבע שעה. שלום. Ki Torah Uma shahaya yochal itbarer, and I'm sorry, I just shouldn't answer the phone. Okay, Hine, all the commandments come from physical things, like we said before. Even so they all come from what's called the world of Tohu. The world of Tohu, it says, Livnei Melech, Livnei Malach Melech b'Bnei Israel. Okay, God made the world in a certain pattern, and the way that He made this pattern is that the higher, what's called the higher worlds, the worlds that are closer to God, the more powerful and revealed godliness there is, and the less concealment there is. And one of these stages in creation, God made it so that there was really too much light and too little vessels to contain it. And it says that then the vessels broke. This was a necessary stage that God wanted. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't too much power in the boilers or something like that in the Titanic. God wanted the world to be this way so that these vessels will, so to speak, break and come tumbling down, become suddenly more and more and more physical. And from that breaking of these vessels, these very high levels of godliness that came tumbling down suddenly, there came all the potential for doing sins, but there also came all the physicality of the physical things in the world. But its source is really very high. And in a way, it's even higher. The source of these breaking vessels is even higher than man. Like it says, for instance, Yitush Kodmach. It says that mosquitoes were created before you. Elashanafel Lamata Bishvira. So man was the last thing to be created. So all the things that were created in a way were before him, implying that somehow or other they're even higher than him. But these things fell down below into the world. If man would not have eaten from the tree of knowledge, then we would see how high the real true high source of this physical world is and why it was worthwhile for God to put us in this world. It's like, digging for diamonds. Diamonds are specifically down deep underneath the ground. Why did God put them down there? That's what He decided. The same thing, God decided all these sparks, whatever is holiness, are in this physical world. But as soon as man ate from the tree, so he became part of the world, not part of the plan. He became part of the problem. So by means of the commandments, as we have now the power that we can rectify, we can put this tremendously confused puzzle that's billions and billions of pieces, and like 90% of the pieces don't even belong in the puzzle, to take out the good and put it in its proper place. That's what's called fixing up the world. Fix it. That's done through the commandments. And from this breaking of the vessels that could be made automatically holy, from that came the angels. The angels, Michael, Gabriel, etc. The angels are holy. But what that aspect of these broken vessels that cannot be purified, that fell down below until it came down to this physical world. And there, from that came the animals and the different physical life forms, plants, etc. Everything that's under the sun, and by means of person, that man has inside of him the name of God, which is the gematria 45. It's one of the ways to spell out the name of God. The name of God is the gematria of 26. But if you fill up the letters, like for instance, Yud is filled up Yud Vav Daled. So instead of being 10, which is Yud is 10, it becomes 20 because you put the Vav Daled. So there's different ways of filling it up. And this represents different aspects of God. That comes down to be the 45. Man, and 45 is also the gematria of man, Adam. So it says by means of Adam being put into all this confusion of the world and darkness and the breaking vessels, etc. But man, when he does a commandment, it does what God wants, and he makes this, for instance, takes an animal and sacrifices on the altar, then this elevates this is those Torah Sabahima, then the animal becomes part of the Torah. This elevates it to its source and the world of Tohu above anything. So this is what's going to be the second level of God coming down, this Chatan, of the groom coming down into the physical world from a tremendously high source. Till a person can actually receive life and blessing from these physical things, instead of them being his enemies and concealing God and making him more egotistical, as this can exactly the opposite, reveal the creator in the world. Similarly, it is with all the commandments. Tzitzit, they come from wool, physical wool. Tefillin, they come from physical, the hide of an animal. This is also the same thing. Lamata, below, a person that does the commandment, because liot mitzvah, when a person makes the commandment into a commandment, in other words, he's putting the tefillin on his arm because this is what God commands. So he's using this physical thing, this physical hide of an animal, and he's making it into such a way that it could be put on his arm, but if he doesn't put it on, it's nothing. But when he does put on his arm, then it draws down a tremendous revelation of God. And this is going to be the second level of the groom of Lamaila, but above, Hine Malas Mitzvahs, the thing of the commandments is very, very high. Even though the commandments are in physical things in the world, the commandments really have a very, very high source. Kiteri mitzvahs, because the 613 commandments of the Torah and the 7 commandments of the rabbis, that comes up with 613, and 7 is 620. And that's Tarach, that's Keter. That's the numerical value of a crown. Keter, the 200, this is 620 pillars of light. That's the 620 commandments, 613 from the Torah and 7 from the rabbis. When doing the commandments, it makes a pillar. And this pillar links the essence of God with the lowest aspects of this world. That's the commandments. And that's what it says, why God says, Achar v'kerem tzartani, that what King David said, backwards and forwards you have created me. In other words, man is the last thing to be created, but if he does the commandments, then kerem, he can get to higher than the essence of the creation. Hamshacha, this drawing, okay, so that's the second level of the groom. One level is that if you have a measured love for God, you appreciate God, so that draws down God into the spirituals. But if you have a tremendous burning love for God, then that reveals even in the commandments to do in the physical world. These two levels of a groom that we talked about, because chus darga, that the word for groom is chatan. Chatan is also chat, means chot darga, coming down. Chot darga, coming down. Two types of coming down into the spiritual, even coming down lower into the physical. This is by means of the two levels of kala that we said before, two levels of the bride. In other words, these, and that God comes into the world, this is a reaction from what we do. The simchat chatan ala kala. Then the groom is rejoicing on the bride. In this case, the groom is God and the bride is us. Is kala, because from the first level of kala we talked about, namely that you have an appreciation of God, a love of God, but you can't be united with God. You're separate, but you appreciate. From this lower level of being a kala, of this love that goes up, bechinat mesirut nefesh, the kalion, this causes an arousal from above. God reacts that his light from his, what's called his great name, the great name of God from before the world, this is a great light of God that comes into Torah, etc. But from the second level of Kala, which is even higher, Kala Nefesh, that you just are totally united with God, not just that you love God and you thirst for God, then I'm sorry, one second, but that's not what he said before. I'm sorry, just one moment. I'm sorry, 1 minute. This is not what he said before. Maybe, could it be that I have made a mistake here? I don't think so, though. Here he said, first level is, the second level is that God is drawn. Okay. So I just, it seems that I switched them around. I'm sorry, switched them around. The first level of love is the highest. And the second level of love, that's the lower level of love. The first level of love is total surrender to God, total uniting with God. And the second level is a lower level. That's what's called bittul hayesh. And that draws God only into the Torah. Okay, so I said with the right thing, I just mixed it up, which was the first one and which is the second one. Good. The first type of love is the highest one. That draws God into the commandments. That is total surrender to God. The second level of God, this is the lower type of God, love of God. This is the lower level of Kala, which this is a, a lust, a loving for God. That's what he says here.
Because when you love, you have still something of yourself.
That's right. That's what he says here. It says, Aleph is self-sacrifice. 1 second, let me get this. I don't know how I made the mistake. Okay, it's a small mistake. The first level of love, it says, is here. First level of love is kilion, total surrender to God. The second level of God, the second level of kala, this draws down the second aspect of God. This is bechinas yesh, because I am loving God and I'm separate from God. So, and this is maybe accessible to everybody. The first level of love totally being one with God. That's like the big tzaddikim. Nevertheless, from the second level, which is not such a consuming love, it's just a total appreciation and lusting for God, then is drawn down wisdom of God only in the Torah. And also the commandments as they are in Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Therefore, after you love God with all of your soul, it says, these things which I command you. I command you, and you should speak in them, the words of Torah. Namely, this is like the Torah. I am the Torah that's speaking in your mouth. That's what it means, maskila eitan. Eitan means, these are the Tanaim. These people who are the Tanaim, as they're called disparagingly, the Pharisees, when they learned the Torah, they were totally united with God. This is the level of maskil. This is drawing down godliness into chesed in the physical world. Shir v'tainug, rana d'oraisa, and that makes a dwelling for God in the physical world until it comes down also into the commandments. In order that there can be this revelation of this level of chatan, so first of all, both of these levels of chatan, you want to reveal godliness, God's reaction in the spiritual worlds. You want to reveal God's reaction in the physical world. As in order to that, you have to have these types of love for God. But before you do any of this, you have to have what's called a chuppah. So getting married, there has to be a wedding canopy. And this wedding canopy, this is soviv kolmi. And generally speaking, this soviv kolmi means like Kabbalat ol or emuna. In other words, a certainty in your soul that God is totally above. The essence of God is totally above any type of love that you could possibly express for him. And then afterwards, you can reveal these levels of the chatan into the world. So let's take it in a very simple way. I think you can have a person that learns Torah, he can do mitzvahs, but all of a sudden, God forbid, something happens to him. something bad happens, he loses his wallet. There's millions of, God forbid, it should never happen to anybody, terrible misfortunes. As soon as that happens, then that's it. He figures, no more God. He gets all confused. Why? What happened? Why? If he really believes this level of chuppah, that he and God are married, that there's something above all logic that unites them, and that everything that happens is for the good. So sometimes things that happen might seem not to be good. But he says that's this level of the chuppah, which is above all logic. And then when a person does commandments with the same feeling, as he does it how do you say, not just in a religious feeling, he's doing a religious thing. There's a little bit logical, there's a part of your soul that wants to be, worries about the spiritual things also, what's going to happen after I die, what's going to happen tomorrow. So you do the commandment. But if you're doing the commandments because you realize that it's totally above any understanding, and that's the same God that's with me all the time in the world, whether good things or bad things, it's the same God doing the commandments, then this is a covering over which embraces both you and the commandments and everything you do. And that's what it says, B'tseil yadi kasiticha. God said, with the shadow of my hand, I will cover you. This is the chuppah that unites the chatan and the kala together. So it's higher than both the chatan, which is God's reaction, and the kala, which is our action that we do. It's higher than both of them. And this is like the agreement that God made with the world, this chuppah, that God will react to what we do. So this is even above the fact that God actually does react. Why would God even make an agreement like this? Why does he care what we do? Well, we're absolutely nothing. But that's the chuppah that covers us over. The love of God, and especially the love of God for the unconditional love of God for the Jewish people. That's what it means. Mitzalot, the joy of the chatanim, comes what? Michupatam. It comes from this surrounding level that God is with us all the time, wherever we are. And when we do the commandments, we're just showing our appreciation for him. And miraculously, he even reacts to what we do. So that's this whole idea of Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs. This goes up and down like a song. We to God, God to us. It's a big, amazing marriage between God and the Jewish people through the Torah and the commandments.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Now we can have to remember where we are, and we'll do this next week, God willing. Have a good week with Moshiach Now. Have a good holiday tomorrow.
And you too.
Yeah, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is with us all. God willing, we'll soon be the raising of the dead, and we'll all dance together with Rabbi Shimon and Yerushalayim. God bless you. Have a good day and a good week, and we'll talk next week.
Bezrat Hashem. All the
Shalom.
best.